I'm trying to think how I want to approach this, just because these review slides, I'm going to read through them, but there's not really a way for me to summarize these. So I'm basically just reading the slides to you. Now, that might be helpful for you if you're listening to the talk. And so by all means do that. But that's pretty much what these slides are going to be for the rest of the semester, because that's how the diseases are kind of listed out as lists. So these are pretty much memorization type of chapters. So first comes chapter 18, which is the skin and eye diseases. The skin and the eye have a similar biota. Sometimes the eye doesn't have a biota, doesn't have a biome, doesn't have normal bacteria that grow on it. But when it does, it's the same, it's similar to the skin. I'm just trying to think of, right, oh yeah, there it is. I was trying to think of the bacteria that are common, and I was like, do I list all, do I say all? But I have these two that I felt like were most important. Okay, so the defenses of the skin, we have high salt of the skin, low pH, so it's a little acidic, a lysozyme, presence of lysozyme. Remember, that is an enzyme that degrades peptidoglycan, which is the molecule that makes up bacterial cell walls. It has the presence of keratin, which is a waterproofing protein, kind of sealing everything up. Resonant biota of the skin include Staphylococcus epidermidis. It's one that we work with a little bit in lab. Maybe you have that organism, maybe you don't, but yes, it grows quite effectively on mannitol salts, but does not turn it yellow. So when it does turn it yellow, that tends to be Staphylococcus aureus. This one where we can discriminate. And then we have Propionibacterium acnes. It's exactly what it sounds like. It causes acne, P. acnes. Okay, we start off with Streptococcus pyogenes. It can cause impetigo, necrotizing fasciitis, and scarlet fever, as well as rheumatic fever and, of course, strep throat, which we're going to get to in another chapter. Pharyngitis is another word for that. That just means inflammation of the throat, inflammation of the pharynx, which is the throat. When you have development of scarlet fever, this is caused by being lysogenized by a phage. And what that means is that a bacteriophage, which is a virus that infects bacteria, has infected Streptococcus pyogenes and incorporated itself into S. pyogenes' genome, inserted it into the DNA of the bacteria. And by doing that, has imparted other genes that have allowed it to produce this toxin, erythrogenic toxin, which is what produces the rash associated with scarlet fever. So that's how lysogeny can lead to, virulence, increased virulence in bacteria. All right, Staphylococcus aureus. We know that this is associated with impetigo as well. And then MRSA, of course, is the big problem, right? It's just methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. And there are worse versions out there, unfortunately. Regular Staphylococcus aureus that isn't MRSA version. A lot of staph out there really is antibiotic resistant, just not MRSA level. And say about staph aureus. Oh, about 4% of the population carries it as part of their normal biome. It's important to remember that a lot of these organisms, not a lot, I don't know why I said it that way. Many of these organisms can be part of the normal biome of somebody's body, but if they grow out of control or in places where they shouldn't be, that's when we see disease developing. So that's the case with Staphylococcus aureus. We know that. Streptococcus pyogenes is another example. We see all these diseases on here that we've listed that it can cause. Well, basically, I don't know. I'm trying to say totally lost my train of thought. I don't know why. Anyways, yeah, it can be part of the normal biome of some folks, but it's just not causing disease because it's not. It's just being kept in check by its neighboring biota. Things can get nasty. Things get, out of control. All right, next is gas gangrene. This is caused by Clostridium perfringens. Now, please try to remember that Clostridium species and Bacillus species create endospores, and endospores are what bacteria might produce in order to protect their genome in harsh conditions, right? So these guys can produce any Clostridium can produce endospores, and these guys do. C. perfringens is also associated with food poisoning. Gas gangrene is an issue. It's more associated with anaerobic growth, so deeper tissue growth, because it is an anaerobic bacterium. It doesn't do well in the presence of oxygen. The chickenpox is caused by a virus called Varicella zoster, which is a herpes virus. Oh my gosh, so many diseases are caused by herpes virus. You probably didn't even know it. So reactivation, so these guys can hang out in your nerves, along your nerves, basically, just like typical herpes simplex can. And reactivation of chickenpox leads to shingles whenever we have lowering of our defenses as we get older. Typically, those older than 50 are more susceptible to having reactivation of varicella zoster. And there are vaccines that help boost specifically against the reactivation as shingles. But that's the same virus. Like if you got chickenpox when you were a little kid, which I did, I am susceptible. I'm likely actually to get shingles later on in my life if I don't get the anti-shingles booster there. It's the same one that you got from childhood. It comes back out. It's been hiding that whole time. All right, smallpox, we don't have it anymore. It's been eradicated from the planet. It doesn't exist anymore. Don't listen to anybody that says that it does. It does not. It is kept in freezers by certain countries, including the United States. Because of issues with bioterrorism fears. So fears of bioterrorism have led us to want to hold on to that. We have samples of it because we claim to want to have it in case somebody attacks us with smallpox. Russia also has it. Russia has a sample, and I forget who else does, but not very many people, not very many countries. The United States does not vaccinate for smallpox anymore, except for the troops. So anybody in the military would be getting vaccines for smallpox because you are our first line of defense and we need to protect you guys. If there were a threat for bioterrorism, then we would start vaccinating, kind of like how we did with COVID. We'd start with our, frontline people and our, first defenders, our doctors and nurses and everything like that. And then we would move on down the line as we've got more. So we just don't have enough vaccine right now to vaccinate the whole country. That's just a fact. Smallpox is, gosh, getting so sidetracked. Smallpox is caused by Variola virus. It was eradicated due to development of the vaccine, where Edward Jenner basically used cowpox, which was called vaccinia, from milkmaids. He noticed that their skin was nice and neat and clean and pristine. So they didn't have smallpox, they didn't have the scars from it. So he took scrapings from cow udder and inoculated his son, and his son was protected, and that was the first vaccine. They still use a variation of that to this day. That's, the first vaccine. So that vaccine is actually called the vaccinia virus. It's a different virus. It is a pox virus, though. And then we have variola virus that causes smallpox. So don't get the two confused. You do have to know the difference, and I probably will try to trip you up on it on a test. Associated with smallpox, we had fever and malaise, typical symptoms of any disease, I feel like, and then a disfiguring rash, which if you haven't seen pictures, you should probably look it up. It is a disfiguring rash. Measles, you have a rash, typical rash. This is caused by a virus. You need to be vaccinated in order to protect yourself from this. We need about 95%, I think, it might be 96% of people to be vaccinated in order to allow for herd immunity. And herd immunity is basically like the vaccinated people, them being vaccinated protects the non-vaccinated people from getting the disease. And we need quite a few people, 95% of them, to be vaccinated against measles to protect little babies and older people who can't get the vaccines. Next was ringworm. This is a fungal infection. There's a wide variety of fungi that can cause ringworm. We call it tinea, whatever. Capitis, for example, for the head, but for it's not caused by worms though. It's just fungi. Then we had talked about conjunctivitis. So moving on to the eyes. I feel like the eyes with further protection for the eye is pretty obvious, like things like blinking and tears. Maybe that's not obvious, but that should be, I feel like. Conjunctivitis, bacterial, viral, and allergic forms. exist. In bacterial, you have like a milky or yellowish discharge. Yeah, you would know that bacteria was growing there, right? Whereas in a viral, you would have a clear kind of exudate, and then allergic, you have copious amounts of fluid being produced. In trachoma, this is the most common cause of blindness worldwide. Trachoma is caused by the bacterium Chlamydia trachomatis. Chlamydia trachomatis also causes the sexually transmitted disease chlamydia. So that's kind of interesting, I feel like, but basically it causes irritation on the underside of the lids that causes scarring, and the scarring is what actually ends up scarring like the cornea, and then that's where the blindness comes from. It can be treated with antibiotics. River blindness, this is caused by Onchocerca volvulus. It is a helminth, a worm, that also has a Wolbachia symbiont. What is that? It just means a bacteria that lives within this organism that makes it more virulent. It makes it more successful at being a pathogen. So that's what that word means when we talk about an endosymbiont. Something that lives inside, endosymbiont, they have a relationship with one another, right? So that's it for the skin diseases, and I will see you next time for the neurological.